We'll now do something a little different and look at some exploitative uses of animals because these are things that we're all familiar with. Starting with the entertainment industry. So we often see movie disclaimers at the end of movies that use a lot of animals, especially in action scenes, just like this scene from Dances with Wolves, where it would appear there is massive buffalo slaughter going on. There was no CGI used in this film. It was available, well, starting to become available back in the 1980s, but I think it was 1980s for that movie. But at the end in the end credits, embedded within the credits, of course, you see this kind of thing, meaning that it was filmed in a very convincing way. I mean, there were models of bison that were used in there for some of the scenes that were shot at various angles that made it look like they were stumbling and being trampled and being bow and arrowed and whatnot. But in fact, no animals were in fact harmed in the making of that movie. And wherever you see that disclaimer in the credits, which nowadays is just about all the time whenever even an insect of some sort appears in a movie, or at least so it seems, the guidelines are incredibly strict in order for them to be able to make that statement in the end credits. I mean, if you just look at the table of contents of this booklet that has these guidelines, it's like, oh my gosh, there's 123 some odd pages in there, and there's an awful lot of introductory detail, the initial 7 chapters that deal with various aspects of movie production, followed by very specific guidelines for different kinds of animals that are used in motion pictures. And yeah, you'll see that even insects and spiders, which are arachnids, are covered in these guidelines. And by the way, in Dances with Wolves, 2 of the bison were actually loaned to the production by Neil Young, and because he was raising bison, he has a ranch, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to his bison. So yeah, everything was fine with that movie, but it was very convincing. Now, of course, it's hard to tell whether you're looking at a live animal or something that was computer generated. What about earthquake prediction? This is kind of fascinating. It's also a bit controversial. Some people have made more of it than they probably should have. But there's obviously something going on here because we're dealing with situations where animals are able to sense things that we are unable to sense. And typically, it's going to have to do with infrasounds, sounds that are below our range of hearing, various types of geological vibrations that they're able to pick up that we are insensitive to, that in some way foreshadow an upcoming earthquake. So, for example, there were some major earthquakes in the 1960s in Alaska, and bears that were hibernating came out of hibernation much, much earlier than they should have, and then, sure enough, within a week or two, the earthquake would happen. There are cases of fowl that refuse to roost at night, and those appear to be predictors of earthquakes. Hibernating snakes leaving their holes where they were hibernating and then freezing out on the ice. This again is Alaska, and sure enough, then the earthquake hits. Abnormal vocalizations in frogs. Okay, well, not quite like that, but you get the point. Abnormal vocalizations produced by frogs. And then this is particularly interesting, I think. A colleague of mine who works in San Francisco was studying foot drumming behavior in kangaroo rats, and which is just a type of normal communication that they use among themselves. The kangaroo rats do, that is, and they have these rather large feet, which is why they're called kangaroo rats. So she had them in her laboratory. And then one night, they started thumping like crazy. She had never seen anything like that happen. And then the next night, this happened.
downtown San Francisco in the background, and we zoom into Candlestick Park in the southeastern corner of this city. For the first time in 27 years, a World Series game will be played in Candlestick Park. The Battle of the Bay continues. Game 3 of the 1989 World Series, the Oakland Athletics against the San Francisco Giants. I'm Al Michaels. Welcome to Game 3.
Candy Maldonado with the hesitation, allowing Jose Canseco to score, and he fails to get Dave Parker at second base. So the Oakland A's take.
I'll tell you what, we're having an earth.
I don't know if we're on the air. We are in commercial, I guess. We are still, as we can tell, on the air, and I guess you are hearing us, even though we have no picture and no return audio, and we will be back, we hope, from San Francisco in just a moment.
So this is what is also known as the Loma Pietra earthquake that was quite devastating. Just look at what it did to this highway, that ripple effect. It's just incredible, the devastation that was done in San Francisco Bay when this earthquake hit during, coincidentally, the very beginning of the World Series game. I think Game 3 is what it was. So, yeah, major devastation, and something was sensed by those kangaroo rats in her lab in San Francisco that really set them off. Okay, then there's examples of training animals to kill people, usually in times of war. This was from the Second World War. Some of you might have seen this example if you've had my General Psychology 1 class. This is the nose cone of a guided missile, and that is a pigeon. Notice there's compartments for 3 different pigeons in the nose cone. Now, what the pigeons were trained to do, we're looking at training trials here, was to peck a screen whenever they saw an image on the screen, but actually they had to peck the actual image on the screen, not just anywhere on the screen. And so again, here we have a training trial, and there's an image off in the distance. Guess what? It's an enemy battleship. What's going on here is that the electronics of where they're pecking is linked into the guidance mechanism of the missile, such that as they continue to peck the image, it's guiding the missile right into whatever it is they're pecking, which is why we see here the images coming closer and closer and closer. And they had 3 pigeons pecking. You don't want to trust one for something like this. That could be pretty scary. You don't know what would happen. So it's really like an averaging of the 3 pecks that's going to direct the missile to the target. Well, actually, it came close to being implemented because the training trials were going really, really well, but it was never implemented, and it all had to do with funding, as does all research. In this case, the funding was at the last minute redirected away from this project to this project. So, yeah, the atomic bomb took precedence over the pigeons. There's also an interesting book called Six-Legged Soldiers that was published in 2008, and I haven't read that thoroughly, but in just browsing through it, I made note of how insects had been used at different times, different periods, in different wars. They were turned loose on the enemy to try to wreak havoc on the enemy. And so in the 1800s, there was a war that involved Uzbekistan. And so they released these assassin bugs on enemy soldiers and because they have a rather nasty sting. And fleas were released by Japan in the Second World War. I'm not exactly sure where, but in some enemy territory, for Japan at least, because they carry plague. And then other instances where mosquitoes were released that carry dengue fever. And what else do we have here? Ticks that carry hemorrhagic fever, even worse. So these documented cases of insects being released during times of war. Now, animals have also been trained to actually help people in various ways.
The biggest workers or soldiers were the first surgical staples. Thousands of years ago, Native Americans in Central and South America discovered that these giant jaws could be used to close a severe wound. The ants readily bite wherever they are placed. The bite hurts like pinpricks. It is the sting on the other end of the body, injecting venom, that is painful. Stings are not deadly unless you happen to be allergic to the venom. The body is easily pulled off, leaving the head that continues to bite. The heads will stay attached and appear to be alive for over 12 hours as the antennae keep waving. The heads can stay on clothing for weeks, even after clothes go through washers and dryers. The jaws must be spread apart to remove them, making them ideal sutures. We have never had a bite become infected and wonder if the ants provide an antibiotic.
So that's really, really interesting, at least I think. And if you've seen the movie Apocalypto, you'll see a demonstration of that.
Hola, Hunter. Hola.
Not a documentary, so I am sure that that poor child was not having those ants applied to him. But basically, that's what you can do with these army ants. If you're out in the field, you need a suture. Wow, if that's the only thing you've got, why not? Here's another interesting aspect of how animals have helped people, and it involves the merging, the intersection of these four disciplines: mechanical engineering, physics, biology, and animal behavior ethology. It'd be right there in the middle. And it's called biomimetics. There's journals that specialize in that. I think there was actually a journal called Biomimetics. And let me just give you an example. Because what we're dealing with here is using nature as inspiration for human innovation. In other words, looking at what animals do and see if we can apply what they do to solve some really important problem. So there's a study that involved looking at woodpecker drumming as shock absorbing systems. Because obviously when they drum into trees, there's an awful lot of potential trauma that would happen to their brains. So, they do have a built-in shock absorbing system. So, engineers and all people from all these disciplines kind of got together to study this situation. These are from this particular journal article, and no, we're not going to be looking at this in great detail because I'm not an engineer and I don't understand any of this. But I know a little bit about woodpecker drumming, but, don't ask me to interpret this diagram for you. Anyway, this is all from this article, and basically they ended up getting something that was quite applicable. Just look at their conclusions in this journal article. The new shock-absorbing system consists of close-packed microglasses within two metal enclosures and a viscoelastic layer fastened by steel bolts, which are biologically inspired from a spongy bone contained within a skull bone encompassed with the hyoid of a woodpecker. Wow, I added the bold emphasis there. So, starting with what you have going on in a woodpecker, now being applied to a shock-absorbing system. And then, looking at some of the data that results from this in terms of shock-absorbing systems and failure rates. I think they use this like in buildings or something. I'm not exactly sure. But, before using the woodpecker-inspired shock-absorbing system, there was like a 26.4 failure rate, which I guess isn't horrendous, but it is a lot. But then look at what happens when they're applying the woodpecker-inspired system. It goes down to 0.7 failure rates. That's incredible. Birds. Birds have much better visual acuity than we do. They can see things that in the distance that to us is only a blur.
In most cases, the larger the animal's eyes, the sharper its vision. And the eyes of the eagle are huge. Eagles are 100 pounds lighter than we are, but their eye weighs the same as ours. Size is just for starters. The back of our eye has 200,000 light-capturing cells per square millimeter. The eagle's has 1 million, providing 5 times the image resolution. The result? A gaze as sharp as a telescope, magnifying its helpless prey to 3 times what our own eyes can see.
So yeah, that's what we mean by visual acuity, the sharpness of objects viewed at a distance. And so they see very accurately and sharply what we would maybe not even see at all. Or if we did, it might just look like a little blob and we wouldn't even know what we're looking at. Well, they can see exactly what they're looking at. And it's not only birds of prey, it's birds in general have much better visual acuity than we do. Okay, how can we use that? Well, it's been used on the west coast of the United States for people who have been lost at sea, maybe some kind of boating accident, something bad happens. And so what they've done is send out specially equipped helicopters, search helicopters, to look for these people. But the helicopters are flown by humans with not so great vision. I mean, not horrible, but, nothing like a bird's vision. Well, what's specially equipped in these helicopters are the fact that in addition to humans, there's also pigeons. So this is an effort that started with the Coast Guard, and there's this little pod underneath of the helicopter. There's a little compartment pod right there. Okay? Inside the pod is a pigeon. There's actually room for more than one. I think there's room for 2 or 3 actually. But here we have a pigeon being put into the pod. The pod is sort of off at an angle while the pigeon's being loaded. There's the pigeon. And now the pod's being drawn up against the helicopter. There's a pigeon. And there's a pigeon right over there. And there's a little screen right there in front of the pigeon. And we see here in a training trial, there's a pigeon, has to focus on the screen and peck the screen if it sees anything in the water. Anything. Doesn't matter what it is. If you see anything floating in the water, peck that screen. That's all the pigeon has to do. It doesn't have to peck a particular spot on the screen, just peck. That will send a message in terms of a light lighting up in the cockpit to the pilot that the pigeon sees something floating in the water. Time to go down and check it out. It could be nothing. It could be clumps of seaweed. It could be whatever. Or it could be a person.
They were placed in sealed compartments, one on each side of the search helicopter. The pecking discs were linked electronically to lights in the cockpit. Pecks from the pigeon scanning to the right would illuminate section B of the panel, which told the pilot to search carefully in that direction.
So lives have been saved as a result of this form of technology. More recently, we have these mind-sniffing rats. They're also known as hero rats. And we can see during the training period being rewarded with some banana. And in fact, oh my gosh, there's this song that somebody wrote. It's actually so catchy, I just got to play part of it.
Hero rats, fighting for mankind. Hero rats, sniffing out landmines. Hero rats, armed with tiny claws. Hero rats, working for our cause. They are small, yet they are mighty, marching bravely into hell. Oh, into the field rats, fighting for mankind. Hero rats, say a prayer for the hero rats. Hero rats, fighting for mankind.
Okay, I played the whole thing. I'm sorry. It's such a catchy song. Yeah.
Mandy and chums have spent several months in laboratories tuning their noses to the smell of TNT, the explosive in landmines. Having completed this stage, they put their nose to the test in the field on a series of courses designed to stretch their mine-sniffing capabilities. Today, 9 real landmines have been hidden. Mandy will have to find them with 100% accuracy. Guided by a search string which is connected between her 2 trainers, Mandy moves systematically up and down the course, processing lane by lane. Every time she sniffs a mine, she scratches the surface at the spot. Weighing less than 5 kilograms, she's too light to set off the explosive device. And when she indicates a mine, she gets what she's in it for, a click followed by a reward. With 9 mines to find, that's a lot of bananas to eat. And as Mandy's ever-expanding pouches show, she's doing rather well.
Mine-sniffing hero rats. Oh my goodness. So let's look at some of the data. So in Tanzania since the year 2000, these rats have found 1,500 buried landmines. Oh my gosh. And they covered like over 240,000 meters. And then in Mozambique, they found 6,693 buried landmines. Oh, even more. Covering they found 26,934 small arms and ammunitions that were buried as well as the landmines. They found 1,087 bombs. And they covered 9,898,690 meters to find all that stuff. That's just incredible. Okay, well, those were hero rats. Let's look at bluegills, a fish. We don't often think of fish as animals that are helping people, but these fish are being used as miners' canaries, so to speak, for detecting water toxins. So the unwanted particles cause them to flex their gills. So that, the water's flowing through the gills all the time. But if there's particles in there that are unusual, they're going to start doing this flexing motion with their gills. And so they're being placed in water treatment plants. And whenever, they start detecting impurities, mercury, diesel fuel, cyanide, pesticides, their gills start going haywire. And this is happening. They're being placed in water treatment plants in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and New York City. And they've already protected New York City from a diesel spill that happened in 2004. They detected it before anyone else was aware of it working its way into the water supply. Okay, then of course, we've already seen in another segment these cancer predicting dogs, and this just shows one of the training trials. We saw a little snippet of that elsewhere. But in addition to cancer predicting dogs, there are also seizure predicting dogs for people with epilepsy. So what these dogs do is they somehow can sense excess electrical activity in a person. We don't exactly know how they're capable of doing that. Of course, they're trained, they're reinforced in the process. And in fact, this is a training trial with this puppy. And basically, what will happen is they'll start jumping on the owner to alert the owner that, you know what, you are about to have a seizure. Please lie down so you don't hurt yourself. And that's basically what's going on in the training trial. A lot of them have been trained in prison, In women's prisons in particular, women who have epilepsy, who are incarcerated, have volunteered to be part of this program and serve as subjects for helping to train these dogs. And it's actually proven to be quite successful. And the dogs have been placed in homes with little kids with epilepsy to warn them of an impending seizure, to keep them quiet, to keep them still. The dogs will often lay themselves across. That's my dog. And in the background, warning me that I'm about to have a seizure. No, I hope that's not going to happen. I don't think so. And then, of course, we have these death-predicting cats. Well, only one that was found in a nursing home in Providence, Rhode Island, and apparently the cat seems to know when people are going to die. Oh, my goodness. So, anyway, before I have a seizure, I'll bring this to an end, and I'm not going to have a seizure. Anyway, these are some exploitative uses of animals.